Military robots are becoming more and more common, mainly in battlefields across the Middle East. And I'm not talking about drones. I'm talking about actual robots deployed with our soldiers on the ground. And so these come in a number of different forms. They can be those tasked with disposing of explosives and things of that sort. There are ones that just do surveillance, even ones that have shotguns and other sorts of weapons mounted on them. So they're becoming more and more common, and both in terms of the technology, but also the psychological impact, our understanding of how our troops and how civilians will interface with these new military robots is continuing to develop basically month by month. And so Julie Carpenter of the University of Washington has been looking into the psychological sort of bonds that are developing between humans and their robots, and it turns out that they're simply fascinating. So we're going to read some of her quotes. She says that they would say, the soldiers that she talks to would say that they were angry when a robot became disabled because it is an important tool. But then they would add, poor little guy, or they'd say they have a funeral for it. These robots are critical tools they maintain, rely on, and use daily, but they are also tools that happen to move around and act as a stand-in for a team member, keeping explosive ordnance disposal personnel at a safer distance from harm. And so it might seem at first odd that a little robot like you're seeing there with arms, it doesn't look remotely humanoid or anything like that. It's probably less similar to human than a Roomba or something like that. But you can develop a close emotional attachment to them. I mean, think about it. You're in Afghanistan, you're there for a long period of time, you're bonding with the other soldiers in your unit, but also these robots. I mean, they're going out, they're finding explosives, possibly saving lives. It's only natural that eventually you would attach some sort of emotional significance to them. And so we have reports of them assigning them genders and names. Apparently very often they name them after their wives and girlfriends and things of that sort. And so that's fascinating, and it probably should have been expected. So they're giving them funerals when they die, they give 21-gun salutes and things like that, the whole 9 yards. And what I find to be most interesting about this is it's part of a broader, I guess, catching up we need to do as a society in terms of how our future military technology will impact both our soldiers, but also the people in the countries that we're continually invading. And so we know from the past few years roughly what people think about our drones, for instance, which are similar cousins perhaps to these ground-based military robots. They don't like them. They're incredibly impersonal. Not that you'd want to be bombed by pretty much anyone, but when there's not even a human being involved, or when that human is stationed in Arizona, it seems to depersonalize the military exchange that's going on. And I think that people's opposition to drones is partially based on that impersonal nature. Now, as of right now, military robots on the ground tend to be either for carrying cargo. You've probably seen the very odd videos of the four-legged mule robots wandering around that are impossible to kick over and things like that. As we said, they get rid of explosives, but eventually we should expect that as both our ability to remotely operate these machines develops and also possibly even artificial intelligence develops, they might be unmanned at some point. And I think that it's going to take a lot of research to figure out how to deploy those in a way that accomplishes the mission of protecting our soldiers without completely alienating the populations that they're either defending or in some cases attacking. And so what's interesting is that as we go through that evolution, the emotional bonds that soldiers are developing with their robots could eventually impact their willingness to use these tools in the way that we would expect, or the way that they were designed for. So Julie Carpenter continues, she says, "You don't want someone to hesitate using one of these robots if they have feelings towards the robot that goes beyond a tool. If you feel emotionally attached to something, it will affect your decision making." And I expect that that is certainly going to be the case. So for right now, when these robots are still relatively new, soldiers develop an attachment to them, and when they die, they give them a funeral. But perhaps in the future, after you've been operating in Afghanistan, Iraq, maybe Syria, with an explosives detonating robot for 6 months, a year, even longer, could that eventually impact your willingness to send in that tool? And that would be extremely unfortunate, because the entire point of having them is to keep humans out of harm's way. Now, in terms of drones, in terms of future possibly war-fighting robots, I expect that that will not actually be a problem, because the ones making the decisions there will not be soldiers in the field, but they will be generals, politicians, stateside. And they will probably not have the emotional attachments that these soldiers do. But it is interesting. We should watch this as it develops, because both in terms of military hardware, in terms of servants that we might have in the future in our own homes that are robots. Like, humans are going to have to learn how to live with these creatures, especially as they become more intelligent and more human-like, both in appearance and in behavior.